this talks to me on using Docker and Ansible to help automate the staging of a wireless LAN controller. Keith's little talk this morning shamed me into taking out my introduction slide. So I'm Jamie Jackson. You can find me on Twitter at TechieJames. I try and stay pretty active on there, and I do have a blog, y-fi.comptechie.net. So first of all, I've never met the guy, but I think anyone who's on Twitter sees so many references to tacos in the cloud that I figured I would put a taco in the cloud. Yeah. Anyways, on to the less important stuff. So disclaimers. This process is designed for a Cisco controller, AirOS based. I'm not inventing anything new with this process. Auto install, config tools, they've been around forever. I just wanted to personally learn Docker and Ansible, and I wanted to do it in a practical way. I think that's the way a lot of us learn, and so I wanted to do something that I could actually use in my day-to-day life. I'm not a subject matter expert on any of this, so if I say something incorrect, find me afterwards, hit me up on Twitter. That's how I learn. That's how we all learn. So, and then I will do an upcoming set of blog posts that do a deeper dive of stuff I can't cover in 10 minutes here. So, first of all, what is Docker? The really dumbed down version that's not entirely correct, but is easy to conceptualize, is that it's like virtual machines, but for individual applications and services. You create an image. That image has the app or service that you're going to want on there, any dependencies that it needs, and then you take that image and you can deploy it out as a container to multiple different hosts. Essentially, if a platform can run Docker, it should be able to run your container. Sometimes you got dependencies that isn't necessarily true, but it's kind of platform agnostic. And containers can be easily created. It's literally a one line to create a container, and you can create them. They scale really easily and quickly. So what's in my Docker? I am using an Ubuntu base image on there, and I have three things in there. One is a DHCP server. It's used to provide an IP address to my controller, and an option 150 to point my controller to the proper TFTP server. So I have a TFTP server as well. That hosts the base config file, and that's used to stage my factory reset controller via auto install. And the third portion is Ansible, and all of its dependencies that it needs to run. And I'm using that particularly to build configuration snippets based on a provided input file. My host configuration is this MacBook with a USB-C Ethernet adapter on there, and I had some problems with Docker for Mac and networking, so I'm running that actually I'm running Docker in a virtual machine on my Mac. I have two NICs configured. One is just my normal NATed one for Wi-Fi for internet. The important one is that USB adapter. I have that bridged through to my virtual machine, and that adapter plugs into my wireless controller into the service port, and that's how I get DHCP from my container to the controller. Ansible really briefly uses playbooks to perform tasks on a list of hosts. That's a very basic version. This is an example of one that I have in there. This is a portion of my playbook. This is going to create any WPA2 WLANs that I have defined variables for. So anyone that's used the Cisco command line, you can see that under the lines, these are just the commands that you would normally be typing in to create a WLAN. And then I have some variable fields defined in there, and I'll show you here in a couple minutes. That's where I'm going to set up the different variables for the different SSIDs that I want to stage on there. So we'll just pop into my demo here. Okay. So this first one here, this is Docker. So on the left-hand side, this is my VM where I have Docker installed, and it's literally one line to start this container up. Doesn't take much. There. That's all it takes. And you can see my prompt changed on there. I'm in the container now. I'm still within my terminal, but I'm running my container just like SSHing into something. I'm in my container. I do need to start DHCP and TFTP. I don't have those set to auto start in this particular example. So I'm going to start those. And now I'm ready. That's all it took to set up my container and have it ready to go. So on the right-hand side here, this is just my controller that I had before it was configured. With a base config before it was factory reset. You can see it's got a little bit of a config on it, not much. And you can see I can't get to it anymore because I've reset it. So we're going to pop into the auto install, or I'm rebooting the controller at this point. It takes a long time for these to reboot. While that's going, I did a Wireshark on there. You can see my DHCP ACK has my option 150 in there that I've defined, and that option 150 address is the IP address of my container. So we'll continue through this, waiting. Okay, we're into the auto install portion now. So auto install is going to look for a few different pre-configured file names. The one that I've named it is Cisco WLPC-confg. That's the third one it looks for, and it did find that. So once it finds that config file, it's going to apply to the controller, and it's going to reboot again. So we'll fast forward again here. I got a ping going just so I can see when I get responses. So I got responses now. In the terminal, you can see that I'm back to I can actually log in now. I didn't have web mode enabled, so I'm going to enable that real quick. And there we go. I'm back in my controller. Same base config I had on that before I factory reset it. Second part of this is the Ansible portion. So we'll pop in that. And in here, this is the same controller, same everything, same base config on it. You can see I've just got one little test WLAN on there. I've got no interfaces other than the normal ones assigned on there. And then I don't have any radius servers assigned here either. So we'll go into Ansible here. First thing, this is my variables file. This is what that playbook is going to look at when it's building the WLANs that you've designated in there. So in this particular example, I have set up 3 interfaces, 2 WPA2 WLANs, and 1 .1x WLAN. So my playbook is going to go through and it's going to build the appropriate amount of WLANs and push them out to the controller. So we'll pop in here. This is 7.6 for the controllers. So this is, it's a one-liner to start your playbook. So really it's like 2 lines to run this whole process. It's very, very simple. So it's running here. It was able to connect to my controller. And it's going to start running some tasks here. And so we'll see, right now it's running my add interface task. So it's going to loop through and it's going to add however many interfaces I defined in there. In this case, 3. So it's adding those. It's going to add the appropriate amount of WPA2 WLANs, which is 2. And then the last thing it's going to do is my 1.1x WLAN. So went through, I didn't get any error messages, anything like that. And if we look in here, I now have 3 WLANs, 2 of them being WPA2 PSK, 1 being a .1x. And then I've got more interfaces in there. And finally, I have a radius server in there. So that's the process. Very high level. Obviously, I didn't really give anything into how that was built, but the blog post that I'm going to put out there going to show you kind of how you can do this. And even if you don't use Cisco, Aruba has a module for Ansible, and really you could take this idea and you could really do it with any vendor. You may have to adapt it, but it's a good learning opportunity. So if you want to learn Ansible or Docker, or just one or either, you know, hopefully this can provide some input on that. And I got 7 seconds left, so I'm going to leave early. Thank you.
Thank you.